When you retire, you may get a chance to go to football heaven. This is football heaven.
Hey guys, welcome to The Mission. I'm your host, Jameer Howerton. And as we continue our 2021 NFL draft coverage, I am so honored to be joined by Fox Sports lead college analyst, Mr. Joel Klatt. Joel, welcome to The Mission, sir.
It's good to be here. Jameer, thanks for having me, man.
Oh, of course. I know we got to talk a lot in a very few minutes here, but you know, it's the NFL draft. And you know better than anyone the mindset of what these young men are going through. And before we dive in and talk about your top offensive players and defensive players, just if you could just paint that picture for our viewers and listeners of just the magnitude of what these young men are about to embark on.
Yeah, I mean, and you know what's interesting about it is you talk the magnitude. I think the guys that have the most success moving forward in the National Football League are the ones that view this more as a starting line and not a finish line. It's so easy to view this as a finish line, and the goal that you were striving for your entire life, you know, is to get to this moment. But those that view it as more of the race is starting, the marathon is starting, this is my starting point to something greater, are generally the ones that have a lot of success. And I would just remind people that it's not just guys wishing that they're going to be called on Thursday for round one. There are hundreds of guys that have, you know, expectations, whether it's round 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you know, guys are hoping to get called in that 7th round, maybe some not hoping to get called so they can be an undrafted free agent. But, you know, it's to me, it's so interesting to think of all the different types of players that are awaiting these few days and what's going to happen with the draft.
Joel, we're inside the RPC here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and it's the Research Preservation Center, and we house over 4 million page documents as well as 6 million photographs. So we have a plethora of so much content here. And before we jump in, I got to bring everybody up to speed on who that guy is right there. You know who that guy is?
Which one? I'm sorry, I can't
Oh,
see.
you really can't see that?
Let me see.
It looks like to me.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, that's you, buddy. That's you, buddy. And you know, you talked about that magnitude, and you may have been an undrafted rookie free agent, but you were also drafted Major Baseball League, so you know better than anyone of what these young men are going through. And behind me is a few draft cards that I'll throw to you a little later on. But let's jump into it and talk about your top offense and defensive players that we're going to see flying off the board come this week.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a few if you don't mind. So let me start with the offense, Jameer. And, you know, I think that it's so easy to just say Trevor Lawrence, but he really is. You know, I think that he's a generational talent, and offensively, he's the best player on the offense. He's the most important player on the offense, and he's the best player overall in the draft. He just does everything well. And I think that to a large extent, he's kind of gone under the radar because we just know he's going number 1. So there hasn't been a lot of discussion about Trevor, but he's certainly the top offensive player. Then a couple of other players at different positions I would just point out. I believe that there's only one other offensive player, maybe overall player in the draft, that you could categorize as potentially a generational talent, and that would be Kyle Pitts, the tight end at Florida. He is a fabulous player, a flex tight end. Florida attacked the field with him in all different areas, short, intermediate, down the field, great hands. I can't wait to see what he's able to do in the NFL. And then I think the best offensive lineman, if you're looking for somebody to help up front, I think Penei Sewell, the young athletic monster from Oregon, he is a guy that I've been so impressed with. He's 330 pounds. And at 19 years old, he was carrying it around like it was 225. You know, he's athletic, he's fleet of foot, he's got that nastiness that you would love in an offensive lineman. So those 3 guys really stand out to me.
Defensively, who jumps out to you?
Well, I think Micah Parsons is probably the most dynamic defender in the draft. I loved watching him and covering him at Penn State. You know, I mean, he does things that you can't coach, that you can't teach. Just instinctively, his explosiveness, his speed, his ability to be an athlete, bend, find the areas in order to make plays and tackles. I think he's phenomenal. And then another guy that I would just throw out there, I think he's the most, well, I should say he's the safest pick on the defensive side, and that's Patrick Surtain from Alabama, the corner. He's a guy that he's going to plug and play right away, and you don't have to worry about him. He's got great football instincts, obviously the pedigree, coming from that family. But he's long, he's got good hands, he can play zone, he can play man. He is a plug and play, safe corner pick out there on the defensive side.
And Joe, you know, as you head deeper into the draft, who are some of those sleepers that you're like, you may get a number, one talent here or a number two talent?
Well, it's so fascinating. I get this question a lot, Jameer, and I always end up saying like different guys. Let me just preface this by saying fit has so much to do with this. It's so difficult to prognosticate which players are going to go to which locations and how they fit in that position group and that scheme and that coaching staff, who they gel with. All of those things are unforeseen, at least at this point. But a guy that I just think could and likely will succeed regardless of location is a guy like Joseph Osai, the edge defender from Texas. The reason I love him so much, Jameer, is one, he was late to football. Okay, so he immigrates to the United States and didn't see his first American football game, until he was 10 years old. Then he played completely out of position at Texas. He was playing inside linebacker up until just last year, and he's really an edge player. So then they move him to the edge, and he started having a phenomenal season, in particular in the back half of the season. It shows me great development, the ability to learn and develop quickly. And then when you talk to people around that program, more specifically, Michael Huff, former first-round draft pick, Thorpe Award winner, a guy I played against, actually, and now he's in the player development department down there at the University of Texas. And obviously a proud alum, won a national championship. And Jameer, when I talked to him about Joseph Osai, one of the first things that he said to me was, he makes me proud to be a Texas Longhorn. That's how he practices. It's how he goes about his business on and off the field. And to me, those are the guys that have success. So you think about his background, his ability to learn and develop, his athletic ability, his ability to be physical and win the edge, and then that mentality that he brings. I think that he could have a lot of success as a sleeper pick.
Joe, we've seen a lot of guys. I wouldn't say a lot of guys, but we've seen a few guys opt out due to the COVID-19 protocol. But do you think those guys that opted out not to play, did it hurt or help their stock, their draft position?
Well, that is really all over the spectrum. It's so fascinating. Let me just give you a few examples. If you didn't have anywhere to go, like you had kind of tapped your potential out, a la Jamar Chase, the wide receiver from LSU, Penei Sewell, the tackle I just spoke about, Micah Parsons. I don't think that it hurt them virtually at all to not play last year. But then you have other guys that had to opt out, maybe for different reasons. So some guys, if you didn't have necessarily an excuse, if you will, or there wasn't a good reason, then NFL teams are like, well, why didn't he play? That's weird to us. Then there are other guys that you would think he could have helped himself. Why didn't he play? Let me give you an example. Jay Tufele, the defensive tackle from USC, excellent player, fabulous player, opted out, probably could have helped his draft stock. But what I think the public failed to realize, his sister got COVID, was in the hospital for a significant amount of time. They racked up a significant amount of medical bills. And his family's not in a position to just be able to cover those. Their ticket, his sister's ticket is his ability to play football. So if he got injured last year, that would have been disastrous for not only him, but his family. So him opting out is obviously looked at in a far different light in NFL circles than maybe somebody that didn't have those circumstances surrounding him.
Wow, that's amazing. And you know, when you look at building a team, because we get a chance to talk to Pro Football Hall of Famer Bill Polian all the time, and he always tells me, Jameer, you got to look at the finances. Then we're going to build, we're going to pick and, you know, build our team through free agency, get a couple of guys, but we're going to build it through the draft. So with that being said, you look at free agency, who do you think got better this year? That team got a little edge.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. I don't think that there was the big splashy free agent this year. Maybe, you know, I think that you could point to Arizona grabbing J.J. Watt. I think a fresh start for him is fascinating. And certainly with kind of the energy around that organization with Kyler as their quarterback and so on. But I would actually point to a team that didn't even sign anybody except for their own guys. How about Tampa? You know, they signed all their own free agents, basically. And getting those guys back in-house as a team that clearly found their footing, won the Super Bowl, obviously, but the back half of the year, they were such a different team than they were early, with Tom Brady just trying to adjust. I think maintaining that roster maybe was the biggest win in free agency, and pretty clearly puts them up there as a favorite to potentially win another Super Bowl next year.
Joel, awesome stuff. I really appreciate this, but I want to take a trip down memory lane and take us through your mindset, because what a lot of people don't know is that, yes, you have day 1, 2, and 3. And you mentioned earlier about this is not the finish line. This is where you start out. And for you, you were a rookie free agent, and you came right in after. And I have to note that here at the Pro Football Hall of Fame, there are more rookie free agents that are enshrined here in Canton than there are with number overall picks, with 21 and 15. So I'm just saying, to your point, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But for yourself, what is that mindset like for the young men that may not hear their name called day 1 or day 2 or day 3, but they still have to stay ready?
Well, I think that the first and most clear perspective that these players have to have is that regardless of where you're selected and or signed, that cannot define you. And if you let it define you, then generally you become somewhat entitled. And certainly that can happen for top picks. And then for other picks, you let that affect your confidence. Right? If you think you should go in the 5th round, you go in the 7th, or you become an undrafted free agent and you lose confidence. Well, why would you let where you were selected or signed define you? So the players that don't allow that to define them generally have a perspective to come into their organization. And Jameer, they understand that they're going to try to be a part of the team, that they're going to try to find the right seat on the bus to play the role that makes the team better. And when they do that, they become great contributors right away.
Well, right behind me, Joel, is some cool artifacts. These are the original draft cards. So when you get these draft cards, and I want to say, okay,
there he is. That was my tight end I played with.
Okay, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. Is it Kolfenstein?
Kloppenstein.
Kloppenstein. Yes, This is your guy. This was your tight end. So our archivist, John Kendall, who leads this whole department here, pulled this artifact, and I wanted to show you this. But these are actually the actual draft cards that the commissioner gets. And this guy right here, future Hall of Famer Drew Brees.
How about that?
What was that like? You know, did you get a chance? I know with your time, you know, with the Detroit and the New Orleans Saints, did you get time to just pick up absorb something from Drew?
Yeah, I did. And before I start, just congratulations on an unbelievable career, Drew. So I was going around to rookie mini camps, not signed. Okay, so I didn't even just get signed right after the draft. I had to go to Detroit and to New Orleans unsigned and play in their rookie minicamp. So I went to Detroit. They said, hey, we would like to sign you, but you know, we don't have the roster space. So I said, oh, that's fine. So I went straight down to New Orleans, went to rookie minicamp. Sean Payton said, hey, we want to sign you. I said, hey, that's fantastic. Drew had just signed. Sean Payton had just gotten there. This is the summer after Katrina. Okay, so they were just kind of coming back to New Orleans. New Orleans was just trying to get back on their feet. And there's two things that stand out to me about Drew Brees. First of all, he was still in his sling. Remember, he had blown out his shoulder late in that season against the Denver Broncos with San Diego. Then he was choosing between Miami and New Orleans. Nick Saban, I believe, went with Byron Leftwich, if I'm not mistaken. And then that left Drew Brees to go with the New Orleans Saints. Two things, though. One is he immediately embraced New Orleans. And he became kind of a son of New Orleans. And he moved right in, down in downtown, not out in the suburbs. He immediately embraced it. And he was like, I'm a Saint. This place is amazing. Let's all rebuild together. That was number one. That mentality, I thought, was tremendous. And a big reason why New Orleans was able to bounce back so quickly is the Saints and what they were able to do that next year, going all the way to the NFC Championship game, if I'm not mistaken. Then the second thing that he did is he was a tireless worker. I told you he was in a sling, and it was to the point where it wasn't just a sling, but it had the pad underneath. Like, he was pretty immobilized, if you will, from that shoulder surgery. And even with that huge sling immobilized, he would get on the treadmill early in the morning. I would try to get in as early as I could. He always beat me in. And he would be on the treadmill, not running. He would be practicing his drop back on the treadmill. So he would be sideways practicing his drop back on 2 or 3 miles an hour. And he would just sit over there for 30, 40, 45 minutes, even an hour in his sling. And I thought to myself, there's something different about this guy. And obviously he's gone on to be one of the great quarterbacks in the history of the game.
Wow, that's amazing. And, as I mentioned before, we have so many artifacts, but just one thing that jumped out about you, mature, tough, and competitive, can drive the ball down the field with his strong arm. But one thing that really jumps out is will take a hit in the pocket, dust himself off, and continue leading his team. Wow.
Well, some people call that stupidity, it's like some people said, I was the clown with the sand in the bottom, you get hit and you just come back for more.
That's amazing. Well, before we let you go, two things. Number one, where can people follow you at, Joel?
Well, on social media, I'm on Twitter at Joel Klatt. You can check out a lot of my content surrounding the draft, top 5 list, top 50 list over at foxsports.com. And then I'll be working with the NFL Network actually on day 1 and day 2 for the NFL draft. I'll be on the side set with Kurt Warner on day 1 for round number 1, and then on the main desk for rounds 2 and 3 on Friday night. So very much looking forward to it. It's going to be a big week.
And lastly, Joel, who is your favorite team?
Well, I grew up in Denver, and I was born in 1982. And that was kind of the same time Pat Bowlen bought the organization. John Elway was drafted. I am a dyed-in-the-bred Denver Bronco fan for years and years. So it pains me to see where that organization is right now, even though they've been one of the most successful, certainly since the early 80s, one of the most successful franchises in all of sports.
Well, with that being said, before we let you go, you're on the clock with the first pick in the draft. Elway looks at you. Who we're taking, Joel?
Denver, I'm trading up. I'm trading up to get one of those quarterbacks. You can't win without a quarterback, and I don't think that even the 5th quarterback is going to be available to them where they're selecting. I think that they're going to have to go trade with Miami.
There it is, Joel. Well, Joel, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you joining us here on The Mission. You're always welcome to come back and sit in and talk with us. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate it, Jameer. Great to see you, man.